with Prime Minister has just concluded, and to give us a sense of the conversation as well as the visit that has been taking place since yesterday, day before evening, we have the privilege of having with us Foreign Secretary Sir Shri Vinay Kwatra. Also joining us on dais today, Shri Manpreet Vora, High Commissioner to Australia, as well as Paramita Tripathi, Joint Secretary looking after the Oceania Division. Sir, may I hand over the floor to you, sir.
Thank you. Namaskar and very warm welcome to friends from the media for this special briefing on the ongoing state visit of His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese, the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia. The Australian delegation, in addition to the cabinet ministers and senior officials of Honourable Prime Minister Albanese, also includes top CEOs of the Australian companies. This is Prime Minister Albanese's first official visit to India since assuming office in May last year, but his third official interaction with Prime Minister Modi. They have both met once in Tokyo last year on the sidelines of the Quad Summit and more recently in Bali summit of the G20. Prime Minister Albanese's three-day, three-city visit to India underlines his enthusiasm and commitment to India-Australia ties. It is also the first annual summit between India and Australia at the level of the leaders. The summit mechanism itself was established as an outcome of the second virtual summit that was held in March last year. Prime Minister Albanese arrived in Ahmedabad on 8th of March, on the day of Holi, visited Sabarmati Ashram, then attended a Holi festivity-filled welcome reception at the residence of Honourable Governor of Gujarat, which was organised in his honour. In the evening, Prime Minister Albanese also attended an education event marking India-Australia cooperation in this field through ongoing discussions, in particular leading to the establishment of campus of Australian universities at the GIFT City in Gujarat. This particular event on 8th evening focused on establishment of campus of Deakin University of Australia in Gujarat. Next morning on 9th, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi joined Prime Minister Albanese at the opening day of the fourth and final Border-Gavaskar Test match at Ahmedabad. Still ongoing, we are in day 2 of the Test match. Prime Minister Albanese thereafter left for Mumbai, where he had three principal engagements. The first one, India-Australia CEO Forum, that was held on 10th morning in Mumbai, which was addressed both by Commerce and Industry Minister Shri Piyush Goyal and Australian Trade Minister Don Farrell. In the afternoon of the 10th, Prime Minister Albanese visited the Western Naval Command headquarters in Mumbai, wherein the Indian defence industry at the Indian Naval Station, Kunjali, was showcased to him. Prime Minister Albanese was particularly appreciative of his visit to INS Vikrant. We are told the first foreign leader to do so since the first indigenously built aircraft carrier was commissioned last September. Today was the official program of the state visit. Began with the ceremonial reception at the forecourt at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, followed by a visit to Rajghat, which was then followed by the first India-Australia annual summit between Honourable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji and Prime Minister Albanese, during which they discussed the entire range of our bilateral relations, as also discussed issues of regional and global importance that are of mutual interest. Several bilateral documents, 4 of them to be specific, were exchanged. Prime Minister Modi also hosted a banquet lunch in honor of the visiting dignitary. Earlier during the day, prior to the commencement of official discussions, External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar called on Prime Minister Albanese at his hotel. In a little while from now, the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia would also be calling on the Honourable Rashtrapati this afternoon. In terms of brief highlights of discussions and the conversation that took place between the two leaders, as also the outcome documents that were exchanged, I would just very briefly summarize them in 5-6 key bullet points. First of all, both leaders assessed very clearly and noted with great satisfaction the strong all-round progress across the range of areas, including science and technology, strategic and security domain, renewable energy, partnership in critical minerals, trade and economic engagement, the full set of progress, comprehensive progress that the two countries have achieved since the relationship was upgraded to the comprehensive strategic partnership in 2020. Second, the intensity of political exchanges. As I mentioned, although this was the first annual summit between India and Australia at the level of the two prime ministers, the two prime ministers have already met since Prime Minister Albanese assumed charge in May last year 3 times. We have had in last year alone at least 18 ministerial level exchanges between the two countries and innumerable official level exchanges to pursue and progress various elements of bilateral cooperation. 3, economic exchanges. I would only list 4 or 5 of them which have been very significant achievements since the last year. One is the comprehensive economic the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, which is ECTA, which is really expected to bring about significant changes to the nature and extent of our bilateral trade cooperation. Second is the ongoing discussions and negotiations on the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, SECA. 3, significant progress in the discussions on Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement. 4th, multiple ways, including in particular through ACTA, especially since its ratification in December last year, to advance our trade and investment partnership. And 5thly, the CEO Forum. As I mentioned to you that the meeting of the CEO Forum took place in Mumbai on the 9th morning, which was addressed by the 2 ministers. The leaders in their discussion also appreciated the considerable progress that has taken place in the field of defense and security cooperation between the two countries. In this context, Prime Minister Modi encouraged the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia to avail of the full range of opportunities that are available in India, deriving out of Make in India initiatives and Atmanirbhar Bharat program for defence manufacturing. Both Prime Ministers particularly welcomed the first batch of officers participating currently from both countries in New Delhi in the operationalization of General Rawat Officers Exchange Program, which was announced during the last virtual summit of March 22 and got started earlier this month. Diaspora and contributions of diaspora, issues relating to Indian diaspora in Australia also came up for discussions between the two Prime Ministers. Of significance in our people-to-people ties were also the discussions on disturbances created by pro-Khalistani outfits in Australia. Prime Minister Modi expressed strong concern on the incidents of vandalism and violence targeting the Indian community and temples in Australia. You must have all heard him say so in his press remarks just a short while ago. Prime Minister Albanese assured Prime Minister Modi that his government has deep understanding and appreciation of India's concern and will be taking all necessary measures to ensure that peace and harmony prevails in their society. In terms of the outcome documents, after the discussions concluded, 4 documents were exchanged in presence of the 2 Prime Minister. First, on audiovisual cooperation. Second, MOU on cooperation in sports. Third, cooperation between Atal Innovation Mission and Australia's Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. And fourth, establishment of 2 task forces, one on solar task force, and second on green hydrogen. The details of summarized details of these exchanges, as also the other discussions, would also be put out in a little while in the joint statement that the XP would be putting out on his website. An additional significant outcome of cooperation between the 2 countries, which although was not exchanged today, but was concluded a week or 10 days ago, is the understanding and a mechanism agreement on mutual recognition of educational qualifications between the 2 countries. That would, of course, open up greater opportunities, not just for cooperation in the field of education, but also would facilitate the larger objectives related to migration and mobility of skilled personnel. Prime Minister Modi also invited Australia to join our mission lifestyle for the environment. Prime Minister Albanese expressed Australia's strong support for India's G20 presidency and in particular appreciated India's hosting of the Voice of Global South Summit in this context. In return, Prime Minister Modi extended an invitation to Prime Minister Albanese to visit India for G20's Leaders Summit in September. You would know that this invitation has officially been extended some time ago, and in today's discussion was just another opportunity for Honourable Prime Minister to reiterate that invitation and to get another opportunity to welcome Prime Minister Albanese later during the year. The discussions between the 2 leaders also covered a range of regional and global issues of importance. And in this context, the leaders discussed a strategic convergence and common interest between our 2 countries, including in the Indo-Pacific region. The overall atmosphere of discussion was extremely positive, productive, and engaging. The leaders were happy with the progress achieved in our multifaceted bilateral cooperation, with engagements and outcomes revolving around sectors of education, energy, sports, defense, innovation, and technology. The visit is a very strong step forward, a successful step forward in advancing India-Australia cooperation and taking them to new higher level. I would stop here, and if there are questions, I'd be very happy to take them.
One by one. As always, please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. We start with Pranay here.
सर प्रणय उपाध्याय एबीपी न्यूज से प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने आज जब जिक्र किया इस चीज का कि मंदिरों के ऊपर जो हमलों की घटनाएं हुई हैं उससे भारतीय दुखी हैं, परेशान हैं, प्रधानमंत्री के इस बात के कहने के बाद ऑस्ट्रेलिया के प्रधानमंत्री की तरफ से क्या आश्वासन दिया गया और सिक्योरिटी जो एजेंसीज हैं वो आपस में कैसे कोऑर्डिनेट करेंगी, अगर आप थोड़ा विस्तार से बता सकें।
Hello, FSR. Siddhant Mishra from CNN News 18. Sir, taking a follow-up on Pranay sir's question, there are two major concerns of NRI community in Australia. One is regarding the prosecution of Khalistani terrorists. They still roam scot-free, and in many of the cases, the criminal charges were not slapped on them. A. B. The most important one is the team. So, is government planning to set up a team on the government level for a smooth dialogue as in terms
Sorry,
of Khalistan?
could you repeat the last part? The most important element is the team.
No, sir. Prime Minister sir mentioned about the teams will stay in touch.
Our officials.
So the formation of new team is on cards.
It's the same question. Yeah. Please.
Parul Chandra, I'm an independent journalist. Is it China's increasing belligerence and growing expansionism in the region that is propelling the India-Australia strategic convergence?
Sudeep, one second. Behind you.
So, Shudhiranjan from Bloomberg. So, you mentioned the two leaders spoke about critical minerals and rare earth. If you could give us some more details on what the discussions were and what the two countries can expect going forward.
Last question, one second before you. Yeah, please.
Sir, my question, I'm Mukesh Kaushik from Dainik Bhaskar. Sir, my question is pertaining to Malabar exercise which is started between India and US. Then Japan joined this exercise. Now Australia has announced to host this exercise for the first time. Do you think that the Quad arrangement is now taking a military kind of shape? And how it is going to affect India-China relations which are already, in the tension because of Quad also?
Whose relation? Your question was India-China relations or a Quad? One was Quad, militarization of Quad.
China has been objecting to Quad. So, is it going to aggravate more?
Will it have an impact on India-China relations?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think that's a pretty comprehensive list of questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions. प्रणय, जहाँ तक आपके प्रश्न है मंदिरों पे जो भी वहाँ पर वैंडलिज्म की जो घटनाएं हुई हैं उसके प्रति आश्वासन जो प्रधानमंत्री अल्बनीज़ी ने दिया, और जो सिद्धांत आपका योर क्वेश्चन रिगार्डिंग टू the concerns of the Indian diaspora in Australia relating to the pro-Khalistani activities in Australia. एक प्रकार से दोनों प्रश्न आपस से जुड़े भी हैं, एक प्रकार से भिन्न भी हैं. देखिए, आपने प्रधानमंत्री जी का प्रेस रिमार्क्स का वक्तव्य स्पष्ट रूप से सुना. प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्पष्ट रूप से कहा कि अपनी औपचारिक वार्ता के दौरान उन्होंने जो भी धार्मिक स्थलों पे वैंडलिज्म की घटनाएं, टेम्पल्स को जो ऑस्ट्रेलिया में हुई हैं, उससे संबंधित जो भी हमारे विचार और चिंताएं हैं वो प्रधानमंत्री अल्बनीज़ी को स्पष्ट रूप से व्यक्त करी. जवाब में प्रधानमंत्री अल्बनीज़ी ने पूर्ण रूप से आश्वासन दिया कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया के कानून के अंतर्गत वो किसी प्रकार की घटनाओं के प्रति जो भी कानूनी कार्रवाई आवश्यक होगी वो उसको करेंगे. वार्ता के दौरान ये भी स्पष्ट किया गया कि इस तरीके की घटनाएं समाज में सद्भावनाओं को अस्त व्यस्त करती हैं और इसीलिए समाज में एक व्यवस्था, पीस और हार्मनी के लिए इसका एक संतुलन और ऐसे जो सामाजिक तत्व हैं जो कि इन गतिविधियों में सम्मिलित हैं उनके प्रति कार्रवाई नितांत एक आवश्यकता है. तो ये आश्वासन जो है ऑस्ट्रेलिया की किस तरफ से मिला. On your specific point relating to the activities of the pro-Khalistani elements in Australia, this also was brought up, and Prime Minister mentioned to the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia that this is something which disrupts the peace and harmony of both our societies, and there is a need to take cognizance of the challenge that this represents. And again on this also, the Australian side, Australian leadership showed appreciation for our sensitization and assured us of suitable response which they would take in this context. They also agreed that the officials on both sides would stay in regular touch with each other between the two systems. Parul, Chandra, I think your question was whether increase in India-Australia relationship is a derivative of China's increasing belligerence. I just read out to you various elements of cooperation between India and Australia that got covered between the two leaders in their discussions. And you will see there are multiple pillars of positive engagement between India and Australia. I just listed 4 or 5 of them here in my opening remarks. As I mentioned, intensity of political exchanges, robust trade and economic partnership, growing defense and security cooperation, people-to-people ties, particularly involving Indian diaspora, large number of Indian students in those countries. And 4, of course, increasing convergence on understanding on the need to develop resilient supply chains, reliable supply chains, ensuring smooth and open running of the sea lanes of communication. All these form are important constituents of very comprehensive India-Australia engagement. And naturally, in this cooperation, one of the elements always is the challenges that both our countries face in the maritime domain. And you heard Prime Minister Albanese himself speak in his own press statement that the maritime domain cooperation is a very important segment of India-Australia cooperation. So I think it is best that we position what India and Australia do between them as a bilateral ecosystem of engagement and partnership, and frankly not a derivative of what a third country does. With regard to Sudhir, your question on the critical minerals, I'm sure you'd be aware that an MOU on co-investments in critical minerals was signed between Kabil, which is the entity on our side, and CMFO Australia. This was in March last year, and discussions between the two sides have since been ongoing. I would simply underline here that growing cooperation in the entire matrix of critical minerals, based on, of course, the complementarities of the two economies, and what are the strengths on the Australian side, what are our needs in terms of our own requirements. So those discussions, and how do then we reduce those discussions into specific elements of cooperation in the field of critical minerals, they have been progressing based on this MOU which was signed between the Indian entity and its Australian counterpart. Mukesh Kaushik ji, to your question on the Malabar exercise and the Quad exercise, I mentioned that, or probably did not mention it in my opening remarks. India-Australia defense cooperation is multi-layered. So at one level we have a set of bilateral and regional exercises. At second level, we also have exchanges between the top senior Army, Navy and Air Force officials between the two countries. 3, we also partner very strongly on operational issues, between the two navies, between the two air force, to some extent even between the two armies. I also spoke of operationalization of the General Bipin Rawat exchange programs. This is a program under which 15 Australian defence officials at various levels of seniority have come to India. 15 from India would join, and this is the first cohort of that exchange program. So when you look at, and our defence cooperation also includes several regional exercises. Malabar is one of them. So when you look at one particular exercise, you need to position it in the larger rubric of defence partnership and not just pick up one element, amplify it, and then extrapolate it to another context. Our defence cooperation is strong, it's robust, it's dynamic, it is multifaceted, it is growing, and it is growing in a manner that, as I said, meets the convergences that both countries have in the maritime domain, and also seeks to address the challenges that both of us face.
Thank you, sir. Shinja.
Sir, it was very reassuring to hear the Australian Prime Minister promising India that action would be taken against all those responsible for the attacks on the temples. Several temples have been attacked over a period of time. The last one was a few days ago, quite some time ago. Have the Australians told us if there have been any arrests and how many there have been?
No, hold on. Yes, ma'am. I saw your hand first round. Apologies. I have very few. Sorry, we'll not be able to do all the questions. I know a lot of interest. Please.
सर मैं कविता जोशी हूँ सर मेरा सवाल एक्चुअली तो प्रणय का जो शुरुआती सवाल था उसी में सर कि जो आपने कहा कि एक तो मंदिरों को तोड़ा जाना ऑस्ट्रेलिया में सर क्या जो खालिस्तान जो समर्थक जो लोग हैं वो जनमत संग्रह करा रहे हैं वहाँ पर खालिस्तान की मांग को लेकर के क्या इसको लेकर के भी प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ने अपनी तरफ से कोई चिंता जाहिर की है जनमत संग्रह का शब्द क्या उन्होंने इस्तेमाल किया है
आपको अंदर रख ले रूम में ठीक है आपका प्रश्न आ गया एक प्रश्न नहीं एक
सर क्या दोनों प्रधानमंत्रियों के बीच में जो बातचीत हुई है उसमें अडानी हिंडनबर्ग रिपोर्ट के बारे में भी कोई कंसर्न ऑस्ट्रेलिया की तरफ से जाहिर किया गया है क्योंकि अडानी ग्रुप का बहुत ज्यादा इन्वेस्टमेंट है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में क्या कुछ कंसर्न ऑस्ट्रेलिया की तरफ से हमारा कुछ जवाब
Manish no I can't do all the questions Manish
Okay.
we are behind you yeah this is the one
Sir, Manas from PTI, Press Trust of India. So both the Prime Minister mentioned about their keenness to enhance the already strong defence cooperation between the two countries, and you mentioned about India's highlight of Australian companies taking advantage of the Make in India policy. So was there any specific discussion to enhance defence cooperation apart from the joint projects or joint collaboration for military production?
Sir I think we are running out of time hand over the floor
Yeah, let me Manas take up your question first. I already sketched out before you various elements of our defence cooperation. Now, so when the two leaders discussed defence partnership between India and Australia, each of these elements featured in terms of its importance and significance in our cooperation. Naturally, it is the effort of both sides, in this case also the defence forces on both sides, to further boost this already strong cooperation between our two countries, particularly in the maritime domain space. Sinjoy, to your question, and Kavita ji, आपका प्रश्न वो समीकरण के दोनों एक ही तरफ के प्रश्न हैं. But I'll just say that, on both these issues, you heard Honorable Prime Minister himself speak very clearly in his press remarks that our concerns, our sentiments, both relating to the incidents of vandalism on temples and the activities of pro-Khalistani activities in Australia, these were shared very frankly with the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia, who in turn assured that they would look into this and take whatever is the suitable measures they need to take to address and mitigate this challenge. With regard to your last question, I have already laid out before you all the elements of discussion that took place between the two leaders on the bilateral space, in the regional space, and on global issues.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you also to High Commissioner, sir, Manpreet Vora, as well as... sorry.
Was your last question?
Specific to Adani, sir, was it raised?
I really don't recall any such thing being raised. Yeah, thank you.
And also thank you to Paramita Tripathi, Joint Secretary of Shina, for joining us. Thank you.